Hi, everyone. We're just going to give folks a few more minutes to join, and then we'll get started. And thank you all for muting as we get started. And as we have chance for questions and answers, feel free to raise your hands then. That'd be great. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We'll welcome everyone to the ARC Massachusetts State Update on Conference Committee and Priority Bills. It's going to be kind of our main topics for today. My name is Jose Lopez. I joined the ARC Massachusetts back in December of 2023. And I'm with the Government Affairs team. And while I have kind of 20 years of advocacy experience, it was in a different environment, in a different country. And what I've kind of found, and kind of always thought this way as well, is that while disability challenges are kind of universal, the way governments manage them are unique to that environment. And so the way that I have been finding and have found in Massachusetts, that it's complex, but I do feel that it's well organized and it's a great area for advocacy. And so I think that's why, so many of us are so engaged with this process. So we'll start today by looking at just an overview of what some of the things we're going to cover today. So we're going to look at the House and Senate budget overviews and how they relate to the governor's budget. We'll look at the conference committee amendments and the conference committee process in and of itself. We'll also look at the viability of our top priority bills. Given that the 193 legislative session is coming to a close, and then we'll have time at the end for questions and answers. Okay. So just a refresher on the overall budget timeline and process. What's important to the governor's initial budget, which is released in January, is the previous fall's kind of spend. To base it off of the latest projections, I think for revenues and for expenses and for actual expenses, I think that's an important time for us to focus on what's the kind of environment around the spend and revenues, and that will help dictate or give us a sense of where the governor's budget may be. So that comes out in January, and then the House Ways and Means Committee will put together a budget probably about 2.5 months later, and then what they will do, that committee will then put their budget or proposed budget for the House, and the House will vote on it, and that to then have a House budget released. Shortly after that, the Senate Ways and Means, I think they work on theirs independently, but they end up coming out fairly similar in many regards. So they will produce their budget report a couple weeks later after the House releases theirs. And then the Senate will have, the full Senate will review the work done by the House Ways and Means, the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and then release their Senate budget. And then we get to the Conference Committee, which is kind of the process where we're at now. And we'll see in a little bit the makeup of the Conference Committee, but basically it's taking members from both the House and Senate Ways and Means and having them look through the differences they have between their two budgets and saying, well, what is a budget that we can kind of agree to, and then put that for the governor as one budget. So that again, that's the stage we're in now, and hopefully, the Conference Committee report will come out with about 10 days for the governor to review it, and then the governor can take a look at it before the fiscal year ends. The governor can veto certain aspects of the report, and then the legislature, again, the House and Senate will have an opportunity to do any overrides of the governor's vetoes if they have sufficient support. And the 9C cuts, I believe, are the way the governor actually works with the budget in practice, making adjustments as the budget kind of goes through the period that's relevant to. So now here is a look at the budget process and how it actually played out. So again, and this is taken from the malegislature.gov website, which is a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of information for the bills, for amendments, for everything that's going on within the legislature. It's just an excellent website. So here they have the budget process. And what I've shown below, again, when the governor's budget came out on January 24th, the House Ways and Means budget on April 11th. The House, as I mentioned, then debates that report by the House Ways and Means to come up with the House's budget on April 26th. The Senate kind of mirrors that process, with the Senate Ways and Means issuing their report on May 7th, again, having time for debate, and then the Senate having recently issued their budget. And now we move into the Commerce Committee process. So with the budget, I think we need to take a step back and look at big picture. What are some of the important aspects or lines for disability services? And when we look at that, the budget in Massachusetts is about $8 billion. So the governor's budget was, which they refer to as H2, was a $7,902 million budget, or basically $7.9 billion. And the House budget, which is, it takes the governor's budget and then makes its own assessments and adjustments. And their budget was only different by 0.2%, which equates to a $17 million difference. And it was $17 million less than the governor's budget. So when you look at a budget the size of $8 billion and have that $17 million difference, that means there's basically a lot of solidarity on the views and the important spends for the government. And again, this is looking at the disability lines in particular that are relevant to our advocacy. So the House budget, again, came in about 17 million below the governor's budget. And then the Senate, again, they do theirs separately, but it kind of comes out very, very similar. Their difference was only 0.4% from the governor's budget, and they had a $31 million increase over the governor's budget. So again, a lot of consistency, a lot of agreement with some small differences, which we'll go through in a moment. But overall, big picture, I think it's a very strong budget that really supports a lot of the asks that we had going into it. So here is the view of the governor's budget next to the House budget and then the Senate budget, with the variance column being the difference between the House and Senate, which will be the focus of the Conference Committee. So while they may come through and assess other things to agree or disagree on, those are the primary differences that we have within our lines. Of course, the budget is really expansive. There's thousands and thousands of bills that the Senate and House kind of consider, but for the budget, those are the main differences they have regarding disability funding. So want to make sure that we're kind of clear on that. So let me go into a little bit of detail here on the budget. So again, overall, it's a strong budget for our constituency. So we should remember that. And as the line at the bottom notes, for these DDS line items, the funding increase of 133 million over the 2024 spend, it's been maintained. So that's pretty impressive. How again, there's consistency from the governor to the House to the Senate to make sure that they are recognizing that they need to do more as far as funding of disability services. One of the important ones is the support to 390 million, which is at the bottom line there, the Chapter 257 reserve. We're looking to confirm additional funds of 95 million, and we'll look at that in the next slide as well. But this budget also outlines a study to review the difference between the operated program salary and benefits and the provider salary and benefits. So information like that really helps to understand why there might be some service provided and some, and what the challenges are that each of the different entities within our state process have. And so that will be, that would be a forthcoming report to help us better understand the workforce challenges. And again, this $390 million is an important step toward funding that, which we all know really is having an impact on those who are underserved or unserved. So some progress there, but of course, more is needed. An additional item that's included within is the PCA language to stop the proposed cuts to the PCA program. That was something that came out of the governor's budget, which really was quite created a stir for us. And so basically it's putting 113 million over the H2 budget for the PCA program to prevent service reductions and maintain eligibility thresholds. It further provides that personnel care attendant, and I'm reading from the text here, hope you don't mind, that it provides, I want to make sure I get this context right. It provided further that the personal care attendant program shall maintain the same eligibility criteria and level of services in fiscal year 25 as were available in 24 and 23, in fiscal year 23. In addition to that important kind of gain that we got back through the process, there's also going to be a working group, which the ARC will be included in, and 5 other groups to review the PCA program with the goal of producing a report in March of 2025. Also has been maintained language to allow flexibility between community line items to continue, so DDS can administer flexible funds for those persons who still cannot return to employment or meaningful day services. And again, that flexibility is important as one goes through the year to handle those issues that become more urgent than were imagined in the budget process at the beginning. It also maintains the flexibility and significant allocation of 2022 funds, which allow for 2 years of graduates, so fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 24, to be supported, as fiscal year 24 graduates may still require services or additional transition assistance. While again, there's a lot of positives within the budget, there were a few exceptions where the autism children's waiver had a decrease of approximately $1 million. State operated homes had a decrease of approximately $2 million. And then DDS administration had a decrease of approximately $980,000. So again, there are always some gives and takes, and we always advocate to try and find ways to get the funds that are needed. But those are 3 areas that to this point have been reduced. On Mass Health, line item 4000-0601, approximately 45 million additional funds are to ensure that the full investment in day rehabilitation to address people with complex needs, which was initially announced in the fiscal year 24 budget. So that's been included as well. And the budget confirms that 10.5 million in the DESE DDS program, reflecting education line item, is going to be continued as well. A few other notable items is the Advocates for Autism of Massachusetts ABA amendment was passed for 100,000. An IE amendment to address the stakeholders' concerns about Mass Health's decision to move to a single entity assessment for LTSS services was included. And unfortunately, the Operation House Call pilot was withdrawn. But we can talk about that in a moment, where that was more of a strategic move than it was necessarily a funding move. So again, big picture for this budget, a lot of consistency between the governor's budget, the House budget, and Senate budget, and a few items for the conference committee to kind of negotiate. Again, here's where we're looking at the workforce amount that's going to be added, the 390 million going for chapter 257, as well as the 95 million, which is coming from the economic development bill from last session. So the combination of those things will help to ensure the ability to increase the median wage to $20 per hour. It's a start, and we're continuing to advocate for more, but this is positive information. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we've gone through the governor's budget release, the House and Senate's budget releases, and now we're going to the Conference Committee amendments and the Conference Committee process. So with that, these will be the Commerce Committee members, and it's made up of the leadership from both the Senate and the House Ways and Means Committees. So the Senate Ways and Means Chair, Senator Michael Rodriguez, the Vice Chair, Senator Cindy Friedman, the Senate Minority Member, Senator Patrick O'Connor, who actually has been a really huge supporter of many of the bills that he co-sponsored, like more than 20. It was pretty amazing. So a great supporter for a lot of our concerns. And then on the House Ways and Means side, you have the chair, Representative Mikowitz, vice chair, Ferrante, pardon, it's covered up by the partially on the screen, apologies. And the Representative Smola making up the House members. And so these 6 committee members will go into a negotiation and deliberation to come up with a final conference committee report, which they'll put forward to the governor, and hopefully they'll give her about 10 days to review. That's the hope for amount. So potentially this report might come out around June 20th, thereabouts. So a couple weeks time from now. On the conference committee amendments, as mentioned before, so these are amendments we're trying to get in through the conference committees, given that the Senate and the House budgets are done. So with this, the Operation House Call request was $150,000 to issue as a pilot program. And as we can see, Operation House Call does important work to help doctors become better acquainted, and students and medical students to become acquainted with best practices for training patients with intellectual and developmental disabilities and autism. So that it's amazing how little of attention there's given to this in the medical school environment, but that's changing. And I think Operation House Call is an important part of that process. And on one of the next slides, we'll show you an article that came up from National Health, which really, and that came out just yesterday, speaking to just that it's an important pilot, it's an important project, and that it warrants the support of the committee. So again, this amendment was passed through the House budget, but it was withdrawn in the Senate budget. And the reason why it was withdrawn, even though it had 15 co-sponsors, and there's 40 senators, but it had 15 co-sponsors. So for one particular amendment, that's a significant amount. And so all of our, our efforts to get the action alerts out there it actually made a difference. So to get that many senators as co-sponsorship was really impressive. But the reason why it is more of a strategic play than it is anything else, than actually the funding itself. So that then will probably give one of the members within, or one of the sides within the Conference Committee some leverage to work through and perhaps get something they want, and then hopefully both will pass through. So that's kind of where the Operation House Call stands at the moment. And as mentioned, it's an important program, and we'll provide the link to this article, which again recognize the importance of Operation House Call and the advances they're hoping to make in the medical area as far as doctors and medical staff being comfortable and more fully engaged with the patients with intellectual development disabilities and autism, and as well as dental services. So again, it's a great area of progress. For the ADU amendments, so this was redrafted and did a lot of great work with Representative Barber to get the dwelling unit to include language to allow owner occupiers to be a special needs trust. And the reason for that was just to be very, very clear that it didn't want to impose limits on who could be the owner occupier of the trust. But unfortunately, that was not viewed as necessary by housing advocates. So unfortunately, this amendment did not get through. So for the language, but I think it is important to recognize that additional dwelling units is kind of how it's phrased within the governor's bond bill, did get through. So that's an important, significant aspect. So while it is going forward, not exactly in the format that we had hoped. The Conference Committee ABA amendment, the Advocates for Autism of Massachusetts Applied Behavior Analysis Training Amendment will pilot a program to provide ABA training. The workforce that requires more training to serve persons with complex behavioral challenges. So that is one of the other amendments kind of going forward. So at the moment, do we have any questions regarding either the budget process or any of the Conference Committee aspects? Okay, so I'll carry on into the viability of our top priority bills. So, this legislative session, we had probably 24 bills at the beginning, and kind of where those have landed now, 8 are in the House Ways and Means Committee. So I guess I'll take a step back first and go through the 2-year legislative cycle, which is what we have here. So again, new session bills are done in January. House and Senate sponsors and co-sponsorship is a process we're very familiar with and playing out and trying to get support for those bills. And then the committee assignment and hearings, which again, thank you everyone for your support and going through that process and going to some of those committees and providing testimonials. The committee review, the joint rule deadline for committees, and then if favorable, moves on to Ways and Means and other committees, 3rd reading, and then if all goes well, gets engrossed and enacted, and then the governor signs into law. So that's our kind of overall legislative cycle. With again, us having at the beginning of the process, starting with 24 or so 24 priority bills. And again, now kind of where we're at is there's 8 in the House Ways and Means Committee, 4 in the Senate Ways and Means Committee, 3 are in Rules, 2 are in the House Committee on Finance, and 3 are in other committees, with 1 in 3rd reading. So some of these, we're pushing for all of these, as we all know, and there's still opportunity to push these through. So as we go through the following important weeks, we'll be coming out with a few more action alerts and asking for your help. And again, appreciate all the vast amount of support and input that we've had to date. So, as we go through this, there's some things which, no matter how much we support them, they still don't move forward. And so here's some of the important bills that we put forward that won't pass this session. And again, we fully appreciate and support the importance of these objectives, and we'll take a look at how do we address this in the next session, how we're going forward, and what should our priority list, and that's a whole other process. But once we get through the end of this session, that is a normal kind of process that I'm sure you're all familiar with. But again, myself being new here, I have yet to experience. Looking forward to that. But again, some really important ones. The House serves workforce rate increases, which we know impacts, the care providers getting back to fully being able to have the day halves and residential services kind of fully provided, to have ABA for adults with mass health, prohibiting discrimination with parents with disabilities, and banning aversive therapies. These are all important objectives and bills that we will we take another look at and see what it will take to make them move forward. And again, I imagine everyone here has a lot of experience in disability advocacy, and it does take time. Many bills can take a decade, and some happen very quickly. But still, there's a lot of time that's going to be to play out for some of these, unfortunately. But we'll keep at it. One thing I wanted to mention, taking a step back to legislative priorities, the blue envelope is kind of an interesting one in that while it's still being considered in our process, it's already been rolling out with police agencies, and so that's kind of a unique thing where it's an idea that has already taken off, even though the bill hasn't been fully considered yet. So that was kind of interesting. And again, we're carrying on with trying to advocate for all these important bills, and hopefully we can get a few more through before the end of the session. So other legislative priorities, again, there's a few things like the community college for direct support professionals, and that's in the Senate Ways and Means Committee. And then family members serving as caregivers in the Healthcare Finance Committee is in the Healthcare Finance Committee. So again, many others that we're still trying to move forward. And, again, we'll reassess as we go